Hi, and thanks for joining me again. Today we're going to be talking about the third trimester and how we can support our students who are in their third trimester of pregnancy. The third trimester can be one of the most exciting times. It can also be one of the most frustrating times. By the third trimester, most mothers are ready to meet their newborn, but they still have a ways to go. The third trimester typically comes with some aches and pains and some sleepless nights, some indigestion and heartburn, perhaps headaches, depending on how you have maintained your nutrition and exercise. The third trimester can also come along with some health risk. Gestational diabetes is typically diagnosed at the end of the second trimester or the beginning of the third. And preeclampsia is another condition that might cause problems in pregnancy if individuals are prone to high blood pressure. It's important to continue to check in with your doctor throughout the third trimester. And during the third trimester, you'll notice that your baby is more active and alert. At this time, the baby's senses are awakening and it can start to hear and even see in utero. It starts practicing breathing, kicking and moving, and it gets prepared to come into the world. Around the end of the third trimester, the baby starts to turn upside down. Typically, the baby's head will face the back body. So the back of the head is facing the front of the body. This gives the baby a perfect position to come out of the vaginal canal. When it's time for the baby to be born, hormones are released that start contractions. These hormones help the uterus to contract and push the baby into the vaginal canal and out into the world. During the third trimester, pregnant mothers might want to further modify their practice, or perhaps they don't practice vigorously at all. This is really an individual decision, though. It is 100% okay for pregnant mothers to practice Vinyasa yoga in a hot studio up until the day they deliver, if that's what they've been doing the entire time. I've seen it. I've had students who have done it with no problems. If you think about women who live in the desert or in hot climates that work outside all day long, lifting and carrying heavy things, they don't suffer or have any problems in childbirth because of their activities, and we're no different. The body is meant to do everything it was doing prior to conception up until the day of delivery if you've maintained your health and well-being. When I was pregnant with my first son, I did not maintain my health and well-being. In fact, I was so terrified of something happening that I was paralyzed. I just stopped. I stopped exercising, I stopped eating right, I stopped doing everything for fear that I might inadvertently do something to hurt my unborn child. In retrospect, I know how silly that was, but it came from a place of fear and a desperate desire to meet my baby. If I had been exercising and taking care of my body throughout the entire time, it would have been fine for me to continue to do so, even up until the third trimester. When I had my two subsequent children, I did walk every day, probably about 5 to 7 miles. We lived in Israel, and I took strolls along the beach every day and every afternoon with 2 kids in tow. I wasn't any worse for wear, and my pregnancies were much more enjoyable. It really doesn't matter, though, whether they are exercising or not, whether they are eating properly or not. The body has a way of creating a safe environment for that fetus, no matter what. Close to the end of the third trimester, women will begin to start to dilate. The cervix starts to thin first, and then it starts to open. Women can be completely effaced and start to dilate weeks, even a month before they start to go into labor. Sometimes when this happens, women lose what's called a mucus plug. It's a gelatinous plug of mucus that plugs the cervix until it's time for the birthing process to commence. Just because you've lost your mucus plug or because you have started to feel some Braxton Hicks contractions and dilated doesn't mean you're in labor. Braxton Hicks contractions are very gentle contractions that prepare the uterus for the bigger contractions that actually do the work. Sometimes women confuse these, and it's important to know what you're looking for if your students start to feel these contractions during practice. Are they feeling hot or flushed? Are contractions coming quicker than once every 5 to 7 minutes? Are they intense and debilitating? Do they stop the individual from practicing or talking? If they do, it's time to go to the doctor. Braxton Hicks contractions will not stop you from walking, talking, or doing whatever activity you're engaged in. These are perfectly fine, and if they occur during a yoga practice, it's perfectly safe. The last trimester of pregnancy is a sweet and gentle time. It's a time for turning in, self-reflection, and our yoga practice can help us with that.